I thought marriage meant security, a roof built on love, not lies. But when I overheard my husband promising our home to another woman, my world cracked. I stayed silent until the bank called about a second mortgage I never signed. That's when silence turned into strategy. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who's ever trusted the wrong person. Because sometimes, the biggest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the one sleeping beside you. From the outside, their life looked picture perfect, the kind of calm others longed for. The white bricked house at the corner of Maple Lane gleamed in the morning light, wrapped in ivy and the faint scent of jasmine from the garden she had planted herself. Neighbors often waved when they passed by, whispering how lucky she was to have a husband like him. Charming, successful, the kind who always seemed to have an answer ready and a smile rehearsed. To them, the house symbolized love fulfilled, a dream built from the ground up. But inside those painted walls, something fragile had already begun to crack. He was a realtor, always on the move, his days filled with property viewings and late-night meetings that stretched too long. She trusted him. After all, this house had been his idea, their forever home, he had said. When they stood on the porch the day they moved in, she could still remember the way the sunlight hit the hardwood floors, how they laughed while eating pizza on boxes because the furniture hadn't arrived yet. Back then, everything felt new, honest, and full of promise. She had believed they were building something sacred, a life no storm could touch. But slowly, the rhythm of their life changed. He began taking calls in other rooms. His laughter, once open and shared, grew quieter, the kind meant for someone else. He became restless, dismissive, quick to irritation over small things. She noticed the perfume on his shirts once, a scent that didn't belong to her. When she asked about it, he brushed it off with practiced ease. A client, he said. Always a client. She wanted to believe him. She told herself that marriages went through phases, that work could wear down anyone's patience. So she tried harder, cooking his favorite meals, keeping the home spotless, even leaving little notes of encouragement in his briefcase. He stopped mentioning them altogether. The distance between them was no longer invisible. It was a quiet wall, growing higher each day. On Sundays, when they used to share coffee on the back porch, he now scrolled through his phone while she tended to her plants. The silence stretched between them like a question neither wanted to answer. Still, she kept smiling, convincing herself that love, if strong enough, could patch any fracture. Then came the financial changes, subtle at first. He told her he needed access to their joint account for business reasons. There were fewer dinner dates, fewer shared plans. Sometimes he came home smelling of expensive cologne and wore new suits she hadn't seen before. She didn't want to seem suspicious, so she stayed quiet. But in the quiet, she began to listen, not to his words, but to what went being said. The home they had built together no longer felt safe. The laughter had gone, replaced by an echo of something cold and staged. Yet every morning, she still opened the curtains, let the sunlight in, and pretended it was just another beautiful day, because denial, she thought, was easier than the truth. At least for now, it was the calm before the storm, and deep down, though she wouldn't admit it, she already knew that something was coming, something that would shatter the illusion of that perfect home forever. It happened on an ordinary evening, the kind that begins with soft music and the clinking of dishes in the sink. She was upstairs folding laundry, humming absent-mindedly to herself, when she heard his voice drift up from below, low, intimate, and strangely unfamiliar in tone. At first, she thought he was on another business call. But as she paused, listening closer, her heart began to pound. His laughter, that careful, charming laugh, had returned. Only, it wasn't meant for her anymore. She moved quietly toward the staircase, one slow step at a time, until the words became clear. He was in the living room, his phone on speaker. "Don't worry, baby," he said with an ease that twisted her stomach. "The house will be ours soon." She doesn't need to know. It's practically done. A pause, then a woman's voice, light, teasing, and cruel. You promise, she said. I promise, he answered, voice dripping with certainty. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking her, clouding everything she thought she knew. Their house, their home, promised to another woman as if it were some trophy, as if she were invisible in her own life. Her hands trembled as she gripped the banister, trying to steady herself. The man she had loved, trusted, built a home with, was selling pieces of her life to someone else, one secret at a time. She slipped back into the hallway, silent, her face pale under the soft glow of the lamp. 1,000 memories flashed through her mind. The late-night meetings, the sudden expenses, the perfume she couldn't place. It all made sense now, and the realization was worse than anger. It was humiliation, quiet and heavy. That night, she didn't confront him. Instead, she moved carefully, her face a mask of calm, when he walked in, phone tucked into his pocket, as if nothing had happened. He kissed her cheek, too casually, and asked what was for dinner. She answered with a soft voice and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The betrayal burned inside her, but she knew one thing. Reacting now would only make him hide deeper. She needed to know how far he had gone. Over the next few days, she watched him with quiet precision. Every lie he told, every receipt he threw away, every text he quickly deleted. She noticed it all. She started keeping notes in a small journal hidden beneath her dresser drawer. Bank statements, changes in tone, missing funds. She learned the rhythm of his deceit, the subtle choreography of a man juggling guilt and greed. Each night, when he left the room to take his calls, she would sit on the edge of their bed, staring at the framed photo of their wedding day. His smile in that picture looked so real. Now she wondered if it ever had been. The walls of the house seemed to listen too, absorbing the whispers, the secrets, the sound of trust, dying one conversation at a time. She wasn't ready to destroy him yet, not until she had proof. For now she played her part, the loyal wife, the silent observer, while the man who once promised her forever made a new promise she wasn't meant to hear. But soon, he would learn that silence can be more dangerous than fury. The morning the bank called, the sky was the color of dull steel, heavy, motionless, and uncertain. She had just finished watering her plants when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. The voice on the other end was polite, practiced, and coldly professional. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. We're following up regarding the payment on the second mortgage for your property on Maple Lane. At first, she thought she'd misheard. I'm sorry, she said slowly. There must be some mistake. We only have one mortgage. The silence that followed was the kind that rearranged everything. No, ma'am, the voice replied. Our records show a second loan was approved 3 months ago, with both your signatures on file. Her chest tightened. The towel fell from her hands. My signature, she whispered. Could you send me a copy of that document? Of course, the representative said kindly. We'll email it right away. When the email arrived, minutes later, her hands shook as she clicked open the attachment. There it was, her name, written in careful cursive, perfect down to the last loop. But it wasn't hers. She could tell by the subtle slant of the letters, by the way the T in Thompson was crossed, too sharp, too deliberate, forged. She stared at the page until her eyes blurred. The man she had trusted with her home, her life, had not only betrayed her heart, but her signature, her identity. He had taken what was hers and signed it away without hesitation. Her knees nearly gave out, and she reached for the counter to steady herself. The bank representative kept talking, explaining that payments were overdue. Foreclosure notices might begin if the situation wasn't addressed soon. But her mind drifted. She wasn't listening anymore. All she could hear was his voice from that phone call. The house will be ours soon. Now she understood what he meant. The promise, the secrecy, the sudden confidence in his tone. He had already planned everything. The second mortgage was his ticket to freedom, and she was the collateral. By the time he came home that evening, she had already printed every document, every email, and stored them neatly in a folder hidden behind old photo albums. She greeted him as though nothing had changed. He kissed her on the forehead, the same practiced affection, and started telling her about his day. She listened, nodding, her eyes tracing the faint stain of lipstick on his shirt collar. At dinner, she asked softly, "Have you been taking care of the mortgage payments?" He froze for only a moment, barely noticeable, before recovering with a smile. "Of course. Why?" "Oh, nothing," she said, smiling back. "Just curious." That night, after he fell asleep, she sat in the dark, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Her anger no longer screamed. It whispered, sharp and focused. She now had proof. She knew what he had done. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel helpless. She felt powerful, quiet, patient, and ready. Because when love breaks, the truth becomes the weapon. And she was just learning how to use it. It was a Saturday morning, calm and deceptively peaceful. The kind of morning when sunlight spills through curtains and everything smells like fresh coffee. She was sitting by the kitchen table, going through her hidden folder of documents, when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, her heart skipped a beat. A woman stood there, young, polished, wearing a perfume that instantly reminded her of his shirts. The stranger smiled, not the polite kind, but the smug sort that carried ownership. "Hi," she said lightly, brushing her hair back. "You must be her." For a moment, she couldn't find words. "I'm sorry," she managed, keeping her tone calm. "Do I know you?" "Oh, not yet," the woman replied, stepping closer without waiting for an invitation. "But you will. I'm the one your husband promised this house to. He said it would be ours soon." The words landed like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Her fingers tightened around the doorknob. Though her face remained unreadable, the woman looked around, admiring the entryway like a buyer inspecting property. "He said you were moving out soon," she continued, her voice almost musical. "Honestly, I wanted to see it for myself. It's beautiful. You've done a great job making it feel cozy." The insult was wrapped in sugar, but it cut deep. Still, she smiled, soft, controlled, terrifying in its calm. "Would you like a tour?" she asked, sweetly. The mistress blinked, startled by her composure, but nodded. Together they walked through the house, the living room where she and her husband once danced barefoot, the kitchen that still smelled like cinnamon and coffee, the bedroom where love had turned to silence. The other woman's heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she made comments, each one laced with arrogance. "This room will need a little updating," she said. "I like more modern styles." The wife nodded. "Of course, some things do need replacing." By the time the tour ended, the mistress was smiling, clearly pleased with herself. She turned at the door, looking the wife straight in the eyes. "You seem calm about all this. Most women wouldn't be." "Oh, I'm not most women," she said quietly. "I don't panic over temporary guests." For the first time, the younger woman's smile faltered. She muttered something under her breath and walked away, heels clattering down the driveway. The door closed behind her with a sound that echoed through the house. Sharp, final, almost cleansing. She leaned against it for a moment, her pulse steadying. The humiliation was still there, but something new had taken root beneath it. Resolve. She went back to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of coffee, and pulled out her phone. That same afternoon, she met with her lawyer friend, a quiet, sharp woman who had seen too many stories like this. Together, they went over every document, every forged signature, every lie. The evidence was clear. Her husband had built a castle of deceit, and now she held the blueprint that could bring it down. As evening fell, she stood by the window, watching the lights flicker on across the neighborhood. Somewhere out there, he was probably smiling, thinking he had outsmarted her. She smiled too, not from joy, but from certainty. The next move would be hers, and when it came, it would be silent, precise, and unforgettable. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need noise, only timing. By the end of that week, her silence had become strategy. Every word, every gesture, every dinner she cooked was part of a plan he didn't see coming. She had decided to end it not with a confrontation, but with exposure, the kind that stripped away his charm and left him bare in front of the truth. She invited him to dinner on Friday, telling him she wanted to make peace, that she was tired of arguing over money issues. He smiled, relieved, not realizing the dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It was an ambush he had already walked into. She set the table carefully, lit candles, poured his favorite wine, and hid the small recording device beneath the centerpiece. Her lawyer friend was nearby, ready to receive the live feed. When he arrived, he was in high spirits, dressed sharply, smelling of cologne that wasn't hers. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek as if everything were normal. She smiled faintly. "Let's eat," she said. Over dinner, she kept her tone light. They talked about business, plans, and the house. It was only when she leaned back and said, "Tell me about your smart investments lately," that he began to boast. His words poured out easily, careless and arrogant, about how he'd used creative methods to get quick cash, how some papers didn't need her approval, and how soon he'd take full control. She sipped her wine, her face calm, while her heart pounded. Then came the final act, the knock at the door. He frowned, annoyed. She excused herself and returned moments later with an unexpected guest, the mistress. The woman looked nervous but curious. "You said we could talk tonight," she told him. His face drained of color. The wife folded her arms. "Oh, don't worry. I wanted her here too. After all, you promised her our home, didn't you?" He stammered, his words tripping over each other, but it was too late. She placed the phone on the table, pressed play, and let his own recorded confession fill the room. His eyes widened, his voice echoing back at him like judgment. The mistress turned pale. "You lied to me too," she whispered. The wife rose slowly, calm as ever. "You both built this on deceit. I just made sure the foundation would collapse on time." When he tried to reach for her, she stepped back. "Don't," she said quietly. "This dinner was never about love. It was your last meal in this house." For the first time he understood, the trap wasn't the dinner, it was her silence all along. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, a place where truth was stripped bare under the weight of evidence. She sat at the plaintiff's table, composed, her lawyer beside her. Across the aisle, her husband shifted uneasily in his suit, trying to look confident. But his eyes betrayed him, darting between her, the judge, and the folder of documents resting neatly in her hands. When the judge called the case, everything unfolded with the calm precision of justice. Her lawyer began, voice steady but sharp, outlining the deception, the forged mortgage, the bank's call, the recordings, and the mistress's involvement. Each word landed like a hammer. Her husband tried to interject, claiming misunderstanding, saying it was all a mix-up, but the evidence spoke louder than his denial. Then came the turning point. The bank representative took the stand. In measured tones, he explained how the second mortgage was processed, with signatures that appeared authentic, but later proved fraudulent. The forged signature was displayed on the screen, magnified for the court to see. Her husband swallowed hard, his face pale. "Can you confirm," her lawyer asked, "who provided the documentation?" The banker nodded. "Mr. Thompson submitted everything personally." A quiet gasp rippled through the room. The judge's eyes narrowed. Her husband's composure cracked, his jaw tightening, as his attorney tried to object. But the momentum had shifted. The lies were collapsing under their own weight. The mistress was called next. Dressed in muted tones, she avoided eye contact, her confidence gone. "Did he ever tell you the property was still in his wife's name?" the lawyer asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "He said he was transferring it, that she didn't matter anymore." The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned back, tapping a pen against the desk. "It appears, Mr. Thompson," he said gravely, "you not only violated the law, but also the very foundation of trust your marriage was built on." Her lawyer handed over the final exhibit, the recording from the dinner. His own voice filled the room again, boasting about the forged documents and the plan to take everything. The sound echoed off the walls like confession. When the verdict came, it was clear and final. The court granted her full ownership of the house, ordered restitution for damages, and stripped him of any claim to her assets. He sat motionless, staring at the table, as the judge dismissed the case. She stood, steady, graceful, walking past him without a word. Justice didn't need her anger. It had already spoken. And as she stepped out into the sunlight, the world finally felt hers again. Clean, free, and unshakably hers. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence felt peaceful, not heavy. The echoes of lies had faded, replaced by the soft rhythm of a life rebuilt. Morning light filtered through the windows, spilling across the freshly painted walls. She had chosen a warm shade of cream, soft and calm, a deliberate contrast to the cold tones her husband once preferred. Every brushstroke had been an act of healing, a reclaiming of space that was rightfully hers. In the weeks after the trial, she moved through the house slowly, room by room, clearing out the ghosts of their past. His suits were gone, his cologne, the photos of fake smiles, all boxed and given away. What remained were her memories and her strength. The home no longer reminded her of what she had lost, but of what she had survived. She began to laugh again, softly at first, as she rediscovered the things she once loved: her music, her garden, the joy of mornings unburdened by suspicion. She replanted the flower beds, filling them with lilies and lavender, the same scents that used to make her feel alive before everything went dark. The neighbors noticed her change. She smiled more, carried herself differently. There was light in her eyes again, not from naive love, but from peace hard-earned. One afternoon, the bank representative called to confirm the property's transfer, now solely in her name. As she hung up, she looked around the living room and whispered, "My house, my name, my story." For the first time, the words didn't tremble, they stood firm. Her life took a quiet but powerful turn. She began volunteering with women who had faced financial deceit and emotional abuse, helping them understand the importance of independence, of reading every document, asking every question, never signing blindly. Her pain had found purpose. Sometimes, at night, she'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars glimmer above Maple Lane. The world outside was the same, but she wasn't. She had been broken, yes, but rebuilt with stronger material. The house that once symbolized betrayal had become her fortress of rebirth. And as the breeze brushed against her face, she smiled to herself and thought, "He tried to sell my home, but all he really sold was his own soul." Because in the end, she realized, justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a woman standing alone in her own doorway, free, whole, and finally home.
The evening had settled quietly over the city, and inside a modern African home, the glow of warm light spread across elegant furniture and polished floors. From the outside, it looked like the house of a perfect family. Inside, however, silence ruled. Samuel, a tall black African man dressed in a tailored suit, sat on the living room couch, staring at the floor with a thoughtful heaviness. Across from him sat his wife, Amara, graceful in a flowing modern gown, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. To friends and neighbors, Samuel and Amara were the definition of a perfect couple, successful, respected, and proud parents of 2 children. Their home often echoed with laughter, their photographs flooded social media with smiles, and their union was admired by many. But in truth, beneath the polished surface, cracks were beginning to spread like unseen fractures in glass. At dinner that night, the atmosphere was heavy. Their children laughed lightly at the start, but the laughter quickly faded when they noticed their parents exchanging cold glances. Samuel chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on Amara, and Amara avoided his gaze, her smile fragile and forced. Later, as Samuel scrolled through his phone, he glanced up to see Amara staring into space, her phone glowing in her hand. He lowered his own device and asked softly, "Amara, talk to me. What's troubling you?" She snapped out of her daze and forced a smile. "Nothing. I'm fine." "Just tired," she said, but her voice wavered. Samuel leaned back, his eyes narrowing. He knew her too well to believe her words. Something was wrong, and she was hiding it. The first spark of doubt was lit by someone close. Samuel's younger brother David visited one afternoon, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He shifted uneasily before speaking. "Brother, forgive me if I'm wrong, but people talk. They say Amara has been meeting someone secretly." Samuel froze, his chest tightening. He dismissed it outwardly with a shake of his head, but inside David's words planted a dangerous seed of doubt. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He turned in bed and saw Amara awake, her face lit by the glow of her phone. He reached for her hand, but she quickly turned the device face down. His voice was quiet, almost breaking. "Why hide from me, Amara? Aren't we supposed to share everything?" She sighed heavily and snapped, "Not everything needs to be shared." "Don't create problems where there are none." Those words cut him deeply. For years, trust had been the foundation of their marriage. Now he felt that foundation crumbling beneath him. A week later, the storm revealed itself. Samuel returned home earlier than expected on a Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet, unusually so. As he walked past the living room into the study, his steps halted. There, sitting at the desk, was Amara, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, a folded letter trembling in her hands. The moment she noticed him, her eyes widened with panic. She shoved the paper quickly into the drawer, wiping at her tears. Samuel's voice was sharp, demanding. "What was that?" "Show me." Amara shook her head, her words tumbling out in desperation. "It's nothing, Samuel. Please, just leave it." But Samuel's suspicion grew like fire in his chest. That night, while Amara slept, Samuel's mind refused to rest. He slipped quietly out of bed, his heart pounding as he opened the drawer in the study. His trembling hands pulled out the letter. Each line he read pierced his heart like a blade. The letter was from a man named Chike. The words scrawled across the page were damning. "Amara, I can't live in the shadows anymore. Our son deserves to know who his real father is. Hiding this truth will destroy us all." Samuel's vision blurred as the letter slipped from his shaking hands. The boy he had raised as his own, the child he believed carried his blood, was not truly his. His entire world spun. Memories of first steps, birthdays, laughter, and bedtime stories now struck him like cruel reminders of a life built on a lie. His chest heaved as anger and heartbreak battled inside him. The next morning, Samuel confronted his wife. Both were dressed for work, but their polished outfits did little to hide the storm inside their hearts. His voice was hoarse and broken as he held the letter up before her. "Tell me it's a lie, Amara. Tell me our son is mine." Amara's tears fell freely as she crumbled before him. "Samuel, I wanted to tell you years ago. I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, afraid of destroying our family. I thought if I buried the truth, we could all survive." Samuel's jaw clenched, his eyes burning. The woman he trusted more than anyone had hidden a secret that cut deeper than betrayal. He turned away, unable to look at her, his silence louder than any argument. Days dragged on, each heavier than the last. Samuel withdrew into himself. He no longer joined the family dinners. His laughter vanished. He avoided eye contact with the boy who had always called him father, torn between love and the cruel truth that gnawed at him. Amara tried to bridge the gap, speaking softly, reaching for his hand, but guilt bound her in chains too heavy to break. Their children began to notice. Their once lively home was now a graveyard of silence, the air thick with unspoken battles. Outside the walls of their home, whispers grew. Neighbors who once admired them now spoke in hushed tones. Friends speculated about the change. The perfect couple was unraveling before their eyes. Inside, Samuel's heart wrestled with impossible questions. Should he forgive her and fight for the family he had built? Should he walk away and reclaim his dignity? Or should he tell the children the truth, risking shattering their innocence forever? Each choice threatened to destroy him, no matter which path he took. One evening, Samuel stood in the hallway, watching his children sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm raging above them. His fists tightened, his breath trembled, and tears blurred his vision. The narrator's voice rose as the camera closed in on his face. The secret was no longer just between husband and wife. It had already begun to tear their family apart. But what Samuel chose to do next would change everything. The silence that hung in the Becky household was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and charged with unspoken pain. The once joyous home filled with laughter, music, and late-night conversations now echoed with distance. Every word spoken between Amal and Fabo seemed cautious, as though both feared shattering the fragile balance holding them together. But deep inside, both knew. The secret could no longer remain hidden. Amal stood near the large window of their living room, her gaze lost in the city lights. She had always been a woman admired for her grace and strength, but tonight her shoulders drooped with the weight of guilt. Fabo sat on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, his jaw tight. His mind replayed the revelations from part 1, every detail gnawed at him like fire on dry wood. The truth Amaho had hidden was not small. It was life-altering. And though he wanted to forgive, part of him could not silence the anger building inside. "I never wanted you to find out this way," Amaho whispered, her voice trembling. Fabo lifted his eyes, their depth darker than the night sky. "You didn't want me to find out, or you never wanted me to know at all." His words cut like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Amo's lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was enough of an answer. Their children, unaware of the full story, sensed the tension. Namsa, the eldest daughter, had grown quiet, choosing to bury herself in her books rather than confront the coldness at home. Loazi, the younger son, tried to break the silence with laughter, but even he had begun to notice that something was deeply wrong. The house that once celebrated birthdays and shared evening meals together was now divided, each member retreating into their own corner. Amal's sister Zinhul visited one evening. She noticed the unease immediately. "What's going on here?" she asked gently. Fabo glanced at Amahol, waiting for her to respond, but Amahol lowered her head, avoiding her sister's eyes. Fabo finally spoke. "Ask your sister what truth she has been hiding from us all these years." Zinhol's eyes widened. She turned to Amahol. "What is he talking about?" Amahol felt tears sting her eyes. The truth had already begun to unravel, and soon everyone would know. That night, Amahol confessed everything to her sister. Zinhol was stunned, almost unable to breathe as the words sank in. "You carried this all alone? Amahol, how could you not tell Fabo?" He had every right to know. "I was afraid," Amahol admitted, her voice breaking, "afraid of losing him, afraid of tearing this family apart." But the irony was bitter. Her silence had already done the tearing. Fabo overheard their whispers from the hallway. His fists clenched as he realized the depth of betrayal was worse than he had imagined. He wanted to scream, but anger warred with the love he still carried for the woman who stood before him. Imagine this. The person you trusted most reveals a truth that shakes your entire life. Would you fight to save the relationship, or would you walk away forever? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could inspire someone watching right now. The next morning, Namsa confronted her mother. "Mama, why is Baba so angry? Why do you both avoid each other?" Her innocent eyes demanded the truth. Amal's chest tightened. Her daughter deserved honesty, but how could she explain the storm that had engulfed their lives? Thabo stepped in. His voice cracked, but he finally revealed what Amalhal had hidden. The truth spilled like shattered glass across the floor, each word cutting deeper into their hearts. The children froze, their world spinning out of control. Namsa burst into tears, Wazi stared in shock, and Amalhal collapsed into a chair, sobbing. The home that once stood as a symbol of unity was now fractured by betrayal. Days turned into weeks. Thabo wrestled with sleepless nights, haunted by what he had learned. Friends noticed his distance at work. Colleagues whispered about the man who no longer smiled. Amalhal, on the other hand, carried visible guilt. Her eyes were dim, her laughter gone. Yet, despite the pain, there were moments when Thabo would glance at her and remember the years they had built together. The love, the sacrifices, the shared dreams. Could all of it be erased by a single secret? Or was love strong enough to survive even this storm? One evening, Thabo's mother visited. She had lived through her own heartbreaks and losses. Sitting them both down, she spoke firmly. "Children, secrets are like shadows. The longer they remain, the darker they grow. But if you face them together, even the deepest shadows can disappear." Her words lingered in the air. For the first time in weeks, Amalhal and Thabo looked at each other without anger, only pain, longing, and the faintest spark of hope. The final test came during a family gathering. Relatives could feel the tension. Whispers floated around. Thabo stood up, his voice steady but emotional. "This family has been shaken by secrets, but I refuse to let it collapse. Love, real love, is not built on perfection, but on forgiveness. And though my heart is heavy, I choose not to let anger destroy what we have built." Amalhal wept openly, reaching for his hand. The room filled with tears, sighs, and a sense of relief. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. But the first step had been taken. The story of Amalhal and Thabo is not just theirs, it is a reflection of many families torn apart by secrets. The lesson is clear: silence can break what truth might mend. Honesty may hurt, but dishonesty destroys. As the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice delivers the closing line. Remember, family is built on trust, and trust must always walk hand in hand with truth. Protect it, cherish it, and never let fear silence your honesty.
The night was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that screamed, the kind that carried memories too heavy to forget. Amalhal sat in her small apartment, staring at the city through the rain-streaked window. The world outside glittered with life, but inside she felt hollow. Everything around her reminded her of what she had lost, not possessions, but a person she once believed would never leave. Tawanda had walked away on a morning that began like any other, but ended like a lifetime ending. He didn't shout, didn't explain, didn't even look back. He simply left. And when he closed that door, he took with him every reason she had to smile. At first, Amalhal waited. She told herself he'd come back, that maybe he just needed space, time, or clarity. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and the silence became her new reality. The love letters she once read with trembling joy now sat like ghosts in her drawer. She had no answers, only questions that burned without mercy. What did she do wrong? Why wasn't she enough? The loneliness broke her from the inside, yet she kept moving, because life demanded it. She worked double shifts, skipped meals, and learned how to keep breathing when her chest felt too tight to let air in. But something inside her began to shift. The same pain that once destroyed her slowly started to build her. She began to see herself differently, not as the woman who was left behind, but as the woman who refused to stay down. Every hardship became fuel. Every tear became strength. She started a small event agency, using her eye for detail and creativity to plan weddings, corporate dinners, and community galas. It was hard at first. No one believed in her. But she had nothing left to lose, and that made her fearless. Years passed, and her name began to echo in the right circles. Her company, Mahal Events, became a trusted brand in Johannesburg. She hired people, built a team, and earned respect. Her smile returned, not the fragile one she used to wear for love, but the confident one she built from pain. The mirror no longer showed a broken woman. It showed a survivor. Meanwhile, somewhere across the city, Tawanda was living a different story. He had everything people envied: wealth, recognition, power, but none of it filled the quiet in his chest. He tried to drown his guilt in success, but every victory felt empty. The faces of others reminded him of the one face he couldn't forget, Mamal's. Sometimes, he caught glimpses of her name on social media, in event posters, in conversations at gatherings. She was thriving. She was everything he once promised she'd become, but without him. One evening, as fate would have it, both of them found themselves in the same space. It was an upscale charity gala, filled with music, laughter, and flashing lights. Tawanda arrived in style, confident as always, until he saw her. And Mahal stood across the hall, radiant and composed. She wasn't the woman he left. There was no sadness in her eyes, no trace of the old longing. She was powerful now, the kind of woman who didn't need to be loved to feel whole. Tawanda's heart raced. He wanted to walk up to her, to say something, anything, but for the first time, he didn't know how. She noticed him too. For a split second, her heart skipped. Memories flooded back, not of love, but of the pain she survived. She took a slow breath and smiled. Not for him, but for herself. She didn't look away, she didn't hide. Instead, she turned gracefully, greeted a client, and continued her evening as if his presence meant nothing. That moment told Tawanda everything he needed to know. She had moved on, and he was just a chapter she had already closed. Later that night, he sat alone in his car, watching the rain blur the lights of the same city where he had left her broken. Now it was he who felt small. Regret clawed at him, whispering all the things he should have said, all the times he should have stayed. He realized too late that love isn't something you walk away from and expect to find unchanged. It grows, it heals, and sometimes it forgets you. The next morning, Tawanda found himself outside Amal's office. He didn't plan to be there. His heart simply drove him. He wanted to see her one more time, not to win her back, but to face the consequences of his choices. Inside, Amal was reviewing event proposals when her assistant entered. "There's someone asking for you," she said. "He says his name is Tawanda." The pen slipped from Amal's hand. The name felt like a ghost resurrected from a past she had already buried. For a moment she said nothing. Then, with calm poise, she nodded. Let him in. When the door opened, their eyes met, and the years between them melted into a single heartbeat. The silence was heavy, but it didn't hurt anymore. She felt no anger, no longing, just peace. He, on the other hand, looked like a man who had seen the cost of his own pride. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "You look different." Amal's lips curved slightly. "I am." There was no blame in her tone, only truth. And in that moment, Tawanda understood that the woman he left behind no longer existed. The girl who once waited for his return had become a woman who no longer needed him. He wanted to apologize, but even that felt too small. So he said the only words that came to him. "I'm proud of you." Amal smiled, calm, composed, untouchable. "Thank you," she said softly, turning back to her desk. "You should have told me that when I still needed to hear it." Tawanda stood in silence, realizing this wasn't his story anymore. He had walked out of her life, and she had built a new one without him. He left quietly, closing the door just as softly as he had the day he first walked away, but this time, it was final. Amal leaned back, exhaling deeply. The ache that once lived in her chest had turned into strength. She wasn't broken anymore. She was whole. And for the first time in years, she smiled, not because of love lost, but because of the woman she had become. The sun was beginning to set over Accra, painting the skyline with strokes of orange and gold. Amara stood by her office window, her reflection merging with the city below. She wore a long olive-green dress, elegant yet simple, a quiet symbol of the woman she had become, strong, self-made, and no longer dependent on anyone to define her worth. It had been years since Kofi left her, and though the wound had once been deep, It had long since turned into a scar, a reminder of her resilience. That evening, as the office lights flickered on one by one, Amara received an unexpected message. It was short, almost hesitant. "Can we talk?" She stared at it for a long moment, her heartbeat steady. A few years ago, that text would have shaken her to her core. Now it felt like a breeze passing through a door she had already closed. Later that night, she sat across from Kofi in a quiet cafe where soft Afro jazz played in the background. He looked the same, yet older, not in years, but in the weight of regret. His dark suit was crisp, his watch gleaming under the light, but his eyes told a different story, one of loss, of realization. "You look good, Amara," he said softly, breaking the silence. She smiled politely, her tone calm and confident. "I know." He chuckled weakly, realizing how much had changed. Gone was the fragile girl he had left behind, replaced by a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ruins he once walked away from. They talked for a while about life, about change, about the things left unsaid. Kofi leaned forward, his voice trembling slightly. "When I left, I thought I was doing the right thing. I was scared of your dreams, of your strength. I didn't think I could keep up." Amara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to keep up, Kofi. You just had to stay." Her words hung in the air, quiet but heavy. He swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "I see that now," he whispered. "I was a fool." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with emotion she refused to let fall. "Yes," she said softly. "But your leaving taught me how to stand." A few tables away, Zuri, Amara's best friend, sat pretending to read a magazine, keeping a close eye on her friend. She had been there through Amara's pain, through every sleepless night and every tearful dawn, and seeing Amara now, composed and self-assured, filled her with quiet pride. After Kofi left the cafe, Zuri walked over. "You handled that like a queen," she teased. Amara smiled, her lips curving with a mix of relief and peace. "Because I am one," she said. "And queens don't beg to be seen." Days passed, and Amara threw herself back into her work. Her design firm, Eden Spaces, had just been shortlisted for an international award, a dream she had once shared with Kofi. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had once thought success would mean nothing without him, but now she realized success meant something because he had left. On the night of the award ceremony, she wore a flowing emerald gown that shimmered under the lights. Cameras flashed as she walked the red carpet, grace in every step. The crowd admired her, reporters asked questions, and her story of loss, perseverance, and triumph spread across social media. Meanwhile, in his apartment, Kofi watched her speech live on television. His living room was dimly lit, the air thick with silence. Amara's voice filled the room, steady and emotional. "I stand here not because I had it easy," she said into the microphone, "but because I refused to stay broken. Pain tried to bury me, but I learned to bloom through the cracks." Kofi felt a lump in his throat. Tears burned his eyes as he realized she no longer needed him. She had become everything he once feared she could be, powerful, whole, and free. The next morning, Amara drove to the beach before dawn. The waves whispered softly, the sky slowly turning pink with the first light. She sat on the sand, her sandals beside her, watching the tide rise and fall. She thought about the past not with pain, but with gratitude. Every heartbreak had been a lesson, every disappointment a teacher. Zuri's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of something she had once said: "The woman who learns to live without him will always live better when he returns." Her phone buzzed again. A message from Kofi. "I saw your speech. You were incredible. I'm sorry for everything." Amara smiled faintly, typing back slowly. "Thank you, I forgive you. But I've moved on." She sent it, then placed her phone aside, closing her eyes as the ocean breeze brushed against her face. For the first time in years, her heart was completely still, no anger, no longing, just peace. Hours later, Amara joined Zuri and a few friends for brunch at a modern rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the sound of joy, it all reminded her that healing was not about forgetting, but about reclaiming life. Zuri leaned over and whispered, "So what now, Miss CEO?" Amara smiled brightly. "Now," she said, "I live, fully, boldly, without fear." That night she returned home, standing before her mirror. The same mirror that had once reflected her tears now reflected strength. She whispered to herself, "He left when I was broken. But now, I no longer need him. Because I found the love I was looking for in myself. As she turned off the lights and lay in bed, the city outside buzzed with life. Somewhere Kofi was probably staring out his window too, realizing that sometimes the greatest loss is watching someone become everything you once held back. The camera slowly panned to the sky, the stars shimmering softly as Amara's voice narrated the final lines. Some stories don't end in reunion. Some end in rebirth. I lost them once, but through that loss, I found myself. And that's a story no goodbye can ever erase. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. Have you ever found strength after someone left you? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional African stories that heal, inspire, and empower. Your voice matters here. Every story reminds us that broken doesn't mean defeated.